Welcome, everyone.
Hey, good afternoon.
Welcome.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello, hello.
We're going to
Good
allow
evening.
everyone to make it into the room before we actually start.
Good evening.
So far, it looks like we have a full house.
Samantha, you'll let me know when you're ready to start.
Yes, ma'am. I'm pulling up my screen right now.
Thank you.
Oh no, what is going on with my funds? Sorry. Hey, Leah, if you're ready to go ahead.
You couldn't give me one more chip, Samantha. All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the planning track for NPU University, course P1004. This is our Zoning Fundamentals 1 class, and it is a required prerequisite for Zoning Fundamentals 2 and for the Zoning Lab, which all follow this class. You will not be able to enroll in those classes or register for those two classes if you have not taken this course. So I'm glad that you're here, and I hope that you will certainly register for the two courses that follow this one. And I hope that you will, like everyone who has taken this class before you, thoroughly enjoy the course and the information that you'll get. Listen, if you don't already have a notebook, a pencil, a pen, or something like that, this is a really good time to get it, because I'm just about to go through some of the preliminaries that we do at the beginning of each class. So again, if you don't already have a notebook, pen, a pencil, or something like that, something that you can take notes with, it's a good time to go get it. Please do keep your microphones muted at all times. Please keep your cameras on in order to receive course credit. Now, if you are not interested in receiving course credit, if you're not in the Citizen Planner Certificate Program, if you're not planning to take Zoning 2 or Zoning 3 or the Zoning Lab, as we call it, or if you've got no other reason that you need to get credit for taking this class, then you can certainly keep your camera off. But if you need course credit for this class, please do keep your cameras turned on. If you'd like to ask a question during Q&A or at the appropriate time, you can raise your hand to get in the queue, and in just a moment, I'll show you how to do that if you don't know. And last but not least, our golden rule: all questions must be relevant to course content. This is one of the few classes that we offer where it is typically okay to ask questions related to specific projects or specific application types. So please do, at the appropriate time, feel free to ask those questions. Just make sure that your questions are relevant to course content. Our staff, I can't speak for any department except planning. And planning staff is typically really, really good at being reachable and approachable. So if you have questions on zoning related things that are not quite relevant to this class, I assure you, you can reach out to any one of us and get an answer or get directed to the person that has the answer. So please, please don't take time during this course to handle issues that should be handled separately. That's the reason for this particular rule, because we often have folks after a class is over who will say, you know, the only thing I didn't like was this one person spent all that time talking about their trash not being picked up and they didn't really relate to the class. So that's the purpose of that rule. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a button that says reactions. If you click on that button, you'll get a pop-up with another button that says raise hand. That is how you raise your hand. If you haven't done it in a while or you haven't done it at all, you now know that is how you raise your hand. At the bottom of the screen, you'll click reactions and then you'll click raise hand. I do like to let people know at the beginning of our classes that we are subject to technology, and most of the time it works. Sometimes it doesn't. So if we happen to have any technology difficulties, I would ask that you please be patient while we try to correct that. And maybe Samantha will sing a song for us if necessary, or something along those lines. Maybe somebody's got a dog that does tricks. But just please be patient if our presenters, instructors lose a connection or if anything goes wrong. We'll get it together as soon as we can. And I think without further ado, I did forget to mention that I'm joined tonight by at least one person from my team. I see Samantha Terry, who is our NPU University program manager and manages all of our educational initiatives for the department. Samantha.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad you all joined us, all 76 of you all.
Wow, it's a nice number. This is without a doubt our highest rated course and the one that we get the most glowing feedback for. And we were just talking before you all came in that with the exception of one class that occurred a couple years ago, this class has the highest engagement rate for sure. So Ms. Harden, I'll meet you in the chat to try to figure out your raise hand issue. But you should, if you click on reactions, you should see a button that says reactions. And when you click on that, you should see a pop-up. And in that pop-up, it should say raise hand. If not, I don't want to hold up everybody else. So I'll meet you in the chat to try to resolve that issue. All right, so without further ado, without a doubt, the most knowledgeable person that I know as it relates to zoning, and certainly the subject matter expert at Atlanta City Hall, my colleague, Director Kieta Holmes of the Office of Zoning and Development. Kieta.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Zoning Fundamentals 1. If you have come to learn and get some general knowledge about zoning as a practice and as it relates to and how we operate here in the city of Atlanta, you are absolutely in the correct place. I will not be speaking in depth tonight about the zoning ordinance rewrite. We will be discussing other topics in 2 other focus workshops on February the 28th and on April the 13th. And if you have not attended any of the focus workshops, you can find the 2 previous sessions on our project website, and you can join us either virtually or in person at our next 2 focus workshops. And please do hope that you join us. So tonight you have me until 8 o'clock. I hope, as I told Samantha earlier today, I hope that you all learn something tonight and that you get some great benefit out of it. I am native to Atlanta, and I chose this profession because as a little girl, I lived along the major corridor of MLK. And today, when I drive along that corridor, it looks exactly the same. And I know that I chose this profession because I was driven to make my community better and then help people understand how they can make their communities better with this regulatory tool that is granted to us via the police powers of the state. So a little bit about myself. I, other than being native to Atlanta, I am a graduate of Georgia State University. I have my undergraduate degree in planning and economic development from Georgia State, and I have my master's degree from the Walden University in emergency management and terrorism and emergency management. I have been in this profession for a while, at least 20 years, and really do enjoy helping people plan their communities better, to make their communities the kinds of communities that they want to live in. And hopefully something that I talk about tonight will spur you to volunteer if you're not already volunteering in your neighborhood association or your MPU. Along with me are my dynamic staff, one being Ms. Raquel Jackson, who's the assistant director to zoning, who leads the zoning division. In my office, you most often see her serve as the Board of Zoning Adjustment Secretary. So you see her every Thursday, every first and second Thursday on Channel 26, administering the Board of Zoning Adjustments meeting. In addition to Ms. Jackson, we also have Ms. Jessica Lavendier, who leads our Brownfield program, as well as our land use change and CDP change process via that legislative process. Recently, Mr. Christian Otiano, which many people knew because of Christian's long-term at the city, retired in December of 2022 and has taken a job in private practice. So right now that position is currently open, and we're seeking to fill that position with someone from our staff who has been there for quite some time. So along with all of these people that you see here and myself, we manage the entitlement process, including rezonings, special use permits, special exceptions, variances, special administrative permits, lot consolidation, subdivisions, and everything. And we'll get into those things in depth in just a moment. And addressing in the city. We are responsible for addressing all the properties in the city of Atlanta. So what is zoning? Zoning is a division of a city or county land by legislative regulations into areas or zones which specify allowable uses for real property and size restrictions for buildings within these areas. So in short, zoning entitles the land. It says what uses can go where, what uses are permitted where, how big the buildings are. We even have some development controls with regards to how big windows can be, how tall the building can be without it having to have this step back, whether or not the sidewalks are of a certain size. All those things are regulated by the zoning district. What is not regulated by the zoning regulations are stormwater issues. We get a lot of calls about stormwater, and that's not regulated by the zoning ordinance. That's regulated under a separate code and handled by the Department of Watershed Management. What we also do not manage is curb cuts or right-of-way permits or anything that happens in the right-of-way. That is all managed by the Atlanta Department of Transportation, and they are the persons and parties that would manage anything that happens in the right-of-way. We also don't manage building code. Building code is actually managed out through our Office of Buildings, which is a partner to the Office of Zoning and Development. The property is entitled in the Office of Zoning and Development and then permitted in the Office of Buildings. And there's a clear, usually there isn't a clear distinction in people's minds about the two different offices because each of the offices have a zoning function. In the Office of Zoning and Development, we are entitling the land. We are saying what can happen on the land, and without us saying either can happen on the land via a rezoning or already entitled through a process of already having the land zoned. That is what we do in the Office of Zoning and Development. In the Office of Buildings, they're permitting the building or the structure. And there is a zoning review component for those properties that do not have conditions, are not under a special administrative permit, are not conditionally zoned. There is a zoning plan reviewer who is ensuring that those regulations under the zoning ordinance are also adhered to. So how did zoning start in this country? So many years ago, when the country first started, there were people who laid out cities. They laid them out in grids, or they laid them out in radiocentric plans, like the Annapolis plan or the ward system in the Savannah plan. And so all those things were the early elements that created what is planning and then what evolved into zoning here in this country. Like anything else, we found that over time, things started to, as areas started to urbanize and more people started settling in places, we found that some uses were not compatible with other uses, and some sanitation systems were not as compatible with other places as they could have been. So there was a need to actually start planning and start enabling and start legislation to enabling how things would be developed in an area. So we go back as early as 1901 to tenement housing, where tenements were coming up in New York City, but they really weren't clean. They weren't safe. There was no sanitation. There wasn't really a good focus on public health and safety. And so that's where the elements of zoning regulations started coming into play. Then by 1913, there was actually in Massachusetts, there was actually an effort to create an actual real planning board and to actually hear cases and hear ideas about how to actually effectively plan good communities that were good and clean and safe for people to live in. And by 1926, there was a landmark lawsuit that was filed by Euclid. Euclid was a company in Cleveland, Ohio. Euclid was a city in Cleveland, Ohio, that sued a company that was trying to build on a property there in their community. And they sued that company. And that's what we got initially the first kinds of conventional zoning districts. Those conventional zoning districts are those districts that are singular uses. All of our single family districts are conventional districts. All of our C1 districts, if you see a C1 or a C2, that's a conventional district. It has really, really basic elements for a zoning district. And then later on, we started doing kind of mixed use districts because we found that you could actively put those kinds of opposing uses together. You just had to have a good plan about how you actually put them together. And so we started doing some more mixed use type of zoning districts. Here's a map of Zion, Illinois, their very first zoning map from 1920. And so this is probably, this is the oldest kind of map that I was able to find showing how land was laid out into different zoning districts here in Zion, Illinois. So where does this power come from? Of course, we know that most things happen in this country based upon a very strict legal system. And so we started things that are regulated in a zoning code are regulated by our actual laws here in our country. Normally, things related to our sign ordinance, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, we can regulate the size of a sign. We can regulate where a sign can go, but we cannot regulate the speech of that sign because that's all protected under the First Amendment. The only time that a sign cannot be erected is if it's obscene, and that's federal laws that protect the average resident or residents or citizens from any obscenities on a sign. Then the 5th and the 14th Amendments are really about due process. And we'll talk in depth in a little while about what due process means and what takings means and equal protection under the law. So to help you understand that due process is the process by which an application goes through the legislative process here in the city. So there's a legislative process that is outlined in order for an application to be zoned from one zoning designation to the next. That application comes into the office, it is sent to the NPU. The NPU and the neighborhood association speak on the application. The applicant comes to their meeting and talks to them about the application. Then there's an actual recommendation from the NPU, and then it has a public hearing before the zoning review board. And then it has an actual action taken on it by city council. That is a due process. And we have to ensure that all those processes takes place and that there is no way that anyone can say they didn't have an opportunity to speak on an application or to present an application for a rezoning. So if you've ever been in an NPU situation, if you send an email from me that says you must hear this application, or this application must go forward, or this application needs a recommendation, it's because we are trying to ensure that there is not an action against us with regard to a violation of due process. Equal protection is making sure that each and every application that comes into our office is treated the same way, whether that applicant is a homeowner that's trying to get a variance to reduce a setback to put up an accessory dwelling unit, or if it's a conglomerate trying to put up a multi-story building on Peachtree Street. Everybody is protected in the same way. In addition to that, there are police powers that are granted under the Constitution to each of the states. So each of the states receives police powers from the federal government, from the Constitution of of the United States. That police power is then given to the states, and then the states then give that police power to the local municipalities. It's delegated to the local municipalities, the counties, and the cities in order to zone property. And ultimately, what we're doing in the zoning process is protecting health, safety, morals, property values, convenience, and general welfare. Here in the state of Georgia, there is the right for persons to develop on their property and to develop on their property consistent with regulations, which is why when someone asks a question of anyone in my office, we're going to give a technical answer because we have to protect the city from any lawsuit by doing exactly what we have set out in our zoning ordinance to do. Now, a zoning ordinance is changeable, that is correct, but at the time that someone submits an application, the rules that are in place are the rules that thereby govern their project. So let's talk about where we are now in the city of Atlanta. So now the city of Atlanta adopted what we call Atlanta City Design in 2017. That was adopted into the city charter and is the overarching vision document for the city of Atlanta. It has 5 tenets: equity, progress, ambition, access, and nature. That any of our regulations, any of our codes that have been amended are all trying to get to this beloved community, create this beloved community for the city of Atlanta, where everybody, whether they are born in poverty or born in excess, that they are all able to meet and have this ultimate life or in this beloved community, and create this beloved community where everybody can flourish. So, with the Atlanta City Design being the actual vision document, it is now a part of our legal framework, right? So the legal framework in the city includes in any zoning process includes the Constitution, any federal laws with regards to telecommunications, which governs all of the telecommunications towers, our Georgia Constitution, our Georgia statutes, including the zoning procedures law, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then any local ordinances, including the zoning ordinance of the city of Atlanta, the 2020 comprehensive development plan, and any local plans that are done by any local neighborhood that is also adopted into our comprehensive development plan. And all of those documents, specifically being the comprehensive development plan and any local plans and the zoning ordinance, is what staff uses to make a recommendation on an application that is submitted to our office. So zoning districts are intended to prevent commercial businesses or industrial buildings from being scattered between residential homes. We do know now that the city has adopted a zoning district called industrial mixed use, and that district allows industrial uses as defined by that district to be on the same property where residential uses and non-residential uses exist. We also know that zoning talks about uniformity in lot development. So if you have a lot that is zoned R4, all the lots that are zoned R4 are to be 9,000 square feet. Now, I want to stop here and make a very important point. The zoning code is effective at the time that legislation is adopted. So when an R4 zoning district is created, there may be parcels that are less than 9,000 square feet. A new lot that is zoned R4 cannot be less than 9,000 square feet, but an existing lot or an existing lot of record that is zoned R4 can be less than 9,000 square feet. And if you have questions on that, I'll stop now and see if there are questions, because sometimes that trips people up. And I want to make sure everybody understands that point. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for offering could you just say that again?
Sure. So my example is about a property that is zoned R4. Properties that are zoned R4, according to the zoning code, are required to be 9,000 square feet in size. If you came into the office and submitted an application to subdivide a parcel of land that is zoned R4, any of the new parcels that are created must be 9,000 square feet. However, there are parcels that existed prior to zoning being enacted here in the city of Atlanta, or prior to the property being zoned R4, because the city can take action to rezone an entire neighborhood to another zoning district, but that land existed before. If a piece of land existed before the zoning was enacted, it is what is called a historic lot of record. It existed prior to the property being zoned. And say that property size is 7,500 square feet instead of 9,000. You cannot subdivide the property at 7,500, but you can build on the property because it is a historic lot of record and existed prior to the zoning being enacted. We good? Okay. Ms. Stout?
Yeah, a lot of our existing R4 are obviously not 9,000 square feet or 70 foot of frontage or whatever. Why did we make them? Why did they start off non-compliant? I mean, why didn't we use a different definition? Do you know what I'm asking? When they created the zoning, why didn't they say R4 is 50 feet and whatever most of these are?
Because, well, I don't know what the thinking was in 1982 when they created the R4 district. But I can tell you that when we do a proactive rezoning, the intent of the proactive rezoning is to create a new urban design element. But we have to but we are cognizant of the fact that lots existed before we added these new controls. And because the state constitution and the federal constitution says people have the free right to use their property, we can't take that away from them. We say, okay, we understand your lot was already existing. We understand these new rules have been applied, but we're not going to penalize you. We're not going to penalize you because your lot doesn't meet 9,000. We're going to allow you to build on it under the new regulations, even though it is a substandard size.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Sarah, if you would like to go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, and apologies if I don't use the proper terminology. I'm new, but I was curious. So if you had been zoned R4 at the time that it was less than 9,000 feet and you wanted to build newly on that property up to the 9,000, would you have to apply to be R4 under the current zoning allowances? Does that make sense?
Say it one more time.
So if you were zoned R4 when the square footage was less than the 9,000, and you wanted to then expand what was built on that property in the current, under the current zoning allowances, would you have to reapply to get up to the 9,000 feet?
You would not. Your lot at less than 9,000 is a historic lot of record. You are then allowed to develop on your property under the R4 regulations. And if you cannot meet the R4 regulations, so you can't meet lot coverage or you can't meet a setback, then you're allowed to apply for a variance, which is relief from the code requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Cooper? You're still muted, Ms. Cooper.
I apologize. If you have a lot that's less than the 9,000 feet, this may have been what she asked, but let me ask it in a different way. And you decide you want to sell your lot, then does the person who buys your lot and now wants to build up to the 9,000 square feet and they apply through zoning, are they allowed to, would they be permitted a variance or whatever is needed so that they can then build up to the 9,000 square feet, or do they have to stick to what you have?
If your property is established as a historic lot of record, you do not have to ever have 9,000 square feet. Your property can be R4 non-conforming at 7,500 square feet. You would have to apply for variances for relief from the R4 regulations that you're required to build under.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Brandenburg.
Hey, thanks for taking my questions. Two questions. One, how long does a variance typically take to be approved? And then does the variance, is it a one-time thing? Does it stay with the lot or is it per, I guess, owner if there's a transfer of title or anything?
Variances run with the land, so they are approved per the land, property address, and then the process length is about 60 days. Mr. Morris.
Hi, Ms. Holmes. Just a quick question. Tell me if you're going to cover this later, I'll ask you later. Are the setbacks the same regardless of whether a lot is a 9,000 square foot lot or above, or one of the historic lots of record? Are the setbacks the same?
They are not. Setbacks are different per the zoning district. When I switch over to the actual zoning code itself, I'll show you different setbacks for different zoning districts. And I will actually go over that a little bit more.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Marsh, you can go ahead and ask your question. And Mr. Taylor, if you want to go ahead and raise your hand for the queue. Everyone, if you have a question when we have our open Q&A, please make sure you raise your hand in the queue. It's kind of hard to manage the questions in the chat.
Did someone else have a question before I go on?
Yes, I've got a question from the queue. How do you know if your lot is a historical lot of record?
There's a process laid out in our zoning code. And if you have that question, we could you could contact the office and they can go through that process with you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think the other question is, what are the types of zoning ordinances?
I think the question is about districts, maybe. So there are 200 plus districts in the city of Atlanta. That is inclusive of all of the sub areas in our SPIs. I think I do have a slide that talks about actual zoning districts here in the city, but I can tell you that the residential districts are all the properties that are zoned R1 through R5 and PDH. So that is R1, which is very large lots, which are 2 acres or more, down to R4B, which is a 2,800 square foot lot. And then R5, which is a 2-family district, meaning you can do either a single family or a duplex on that property. That minimum lot size is 7,500 square feet. And then we get into our commercial districts, our office institutional districts, then some of our mixed use districts being iMix and MRC, our quality of life districts being multifamily residential, live work. So we have a varied amount of zoning districts here in the city. Ms. Carter, I'll take Ms. Carter's last question and I'll move on to my next slide.
So if I have a lot that is R4, but it's 21,700 square feet, is it, am I able to subdivide the lot and then try to rezone the side that I subdivide or the new lot and get it rezoned for R5 for a duplex in an R4 zone?
Okay, so a couple of different questions there. So your lot that is now 21,000 square feet, you can submit an application to subdivide that into conforming R4 lots, which would all be required to be 9,000 square feet and have 70 feet of frontage. The other part of your question with regard to rezoning, we do not prohibit anyone from submitting an application to rezone a piece of property. However, you must consider the land use in that area, which is whether it's single family residential or low density residential, which the compatible land use with R5 is low density residential. And if you are in an area where every single property is single family residential and R4, it is going to be very difficult unless you're on a major corridor or in an area of a neighborhood where it has been identified that they want to increase the density for you to get an approval to rezone that piece of property. Then approval would be granted by city council.
So it would not have to be the neighborhood planning unit that approves it, just the city council.
It is the city council that ultimately approves all the legislation, but you've got to go through the neighborhood association, the NPU, the staff, the ZRB. You need a favorable recommendation from each one of those entities in order for city council to approve.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's go on in my presentation here. So zoning prevents adverse built conditions on adjacent properties. So it establishes height limitations and lot coverages and setbacks and fence heights. A fence height in a residential district is 6 feet on the side and rear yards and 4 feet in the front yard. Setbacks can range from 10 feet to 15 feet to 5 feet, depending on the zoning district. In places where there is single-family zoning, abutting multifamily zoning, or high-rise multifamily zoning, we have what is called a transitional height plane. The transitional height plane was established so that large and tall buildings do not overshadow smaller houses, and so that sunlight is still able to get to those houses, and there isn't this adverse environment for the built conditions. There are also transitional yard requirements between districts. There's a class of districts that are protected. Those are our single family districts. And then districts like MRC or C1, if they are abutting a single family district, there's a transitional yard required between those districts to keep them from having adverse conditions on each of the opposing properties. Zoning also requires a compatible land use. Now, this goes back to, I believe, Ms. Carter's question with regard to rezoning a piece of property from R4 to R5. So a piece of property that is zoned R1 through R4B has a compatible land use designation of single family residential. If someone comes and submits an application and says, hey, I want to rezone my single family property to R5 because I want to build duplexes on my property, and then someone in my office, a planner in my office, will say, okay, sure, you can submit an application to do that, but you're also going to need to change your land use. Your land use will need to change to a compatible land use for R5 that is low density residential. I will show you our land use compatibility table that all of the planners have on their desk, so they can talk with applicants and help them understand, not only do you have to have, not only are you seeking a new zoning category, but you will also ultimately be seeking a new land use category should you be rezoning to a more intense zoning. So land use starts very low density with R1 and goes all the way up to our mixed use categories with MRC3. The last thing I'll tell you about zoning in this instance is that it also is about improving the appearance of certain areas. So there's the regulations with regard to fence heights and fenestration on buildings and building setbacks, stepbacks and building materials. All those things are about how the built environment interacts with the pedestrian. We don't want a pedestrian to be walking by a building and there is these dead areas. We want them to see activity on the street level. So all those things are embedded in our zoning ordinance. So let's talk about zoning procedures law. So there is a procedure by which every application in our office goes through a process. So Georgia defines what the minimum procedures are, and then we as the staff implement those minimum decisions. So there must be an adoption of a zoning ordinance. The 1982 zoning ordinance and all of the voluminous pages that it is the actual guiding document of the city. We could change a district regulation via a text amendment. So if you've been involved with the MPUs here recently, there was a text amendment with regard to ghost kitchens. So ghost kitchens legislation was legislation to allow that type of use in districts that are zoned C1 and C2 and I1 to allow that type of entity to be created and have that type of commerce here in the city. So a text amendment, a draft of an ordinance was written up. That text was then sent to all 25 MPUs, and all 25 MPUs was asked to opine on it by providing us a recommendation. I want to stop here and make sure that people understand that text amendments are very important for everyone to opine on. I've heard some MPUs say, well, it doesn't matter to me because the use is not in my neighborhood, or I'm not involved in this because of X. Zoning affects every single entity or person in the city of Atlanta. When decisions are made in my office, they are decisions that are binding, and those decisions, just because the business or the use or the structural type doesn't occur in your neighborhood today, does not mean it may not occur in your neighborhood tomorrow. And if we are living in a beloved community, all of us must be opining on and be a part of the zoning process. With regard to rezoning a piece of property, if someone submits an application to rezone a piece of property, we have a step-by-step process in order to do that. You must submit your site plan to what is called CRC, or the Concept Review Committee. At Concept Review Committee, you have all of the development departments at the table, providing you, the applicant, with good information about things that you need to consider in your project. Once you receive your CRC comments or have your meeting, then you take your site plan back, you take into account what those development departments have said you need to account for, and then you submit your application to the Office of Zoning and Development for rezoning. Once my staff receives that application, they process the application, you pay an invoice, they assign you a Z number, and then they give you back a copy of your application. And then someone on my team is then assigned that application. That application, they then send you a planner's introduction, which introducing themselves to you because they now become your planner for your application. And then they say, hey, you need to contact your MPU. Your MPU, where the project is going to tell you we meet on this day, but you need to also meet with our neighborhood association or our board or this or that prior to coming to the MPU. That is the community engagement process. It's very important that people understand that public participation is protecting your due process, and that you must hear from the applicant. The applicant must have the opportunity to speak. Once they have the opportunity to speak, they have a hearing before the Zoning Review Board. There's an actual public hearing. If you've not been to a Zoning Review Board meeting, I highly encourage you to either watch it on Channel 26 live. Our meetings are the first and second Thursday of every month at 6 p.m. or come down to City Hall and just sit in and view a Zoning Review Board meeting. You hear our members of our community who are on that board engaging with the applicant, asking them questions, and then making a decision on the application, whether it's to approve it conditionally, or to deny it. Once that takes place, then the application is heard before the zoning committee, which is made up of 6 members of city council. And then the zoning committee makes a to the full city council, and then it's full city council who makes a decision on an application. Right? So that's the full process. In addition to those things, the property must be posted. So there's a posting on the property, a green sign with a big Z and the case number on it. There's a postcard that's sent to persons within 300 feet. And then in addition to that, there's a legal advertisement that's posted in the Fulton County Daily Report. The next thing I'll talk about is zoning annexed property. In the City of Atlanta zoning ordinance, there's a provision that says all property must have a zoning category. So if you've been around the city for the last couple of years, there've been some pretty big annexations. There were some here in Southwest Atlanta along Cascade Road before City of South Fulton was incorporated. There was the Emory University annexation maybe 2 or 3 years ago. We've had a couple of annexations along Glenwood Avenue and along in Southeast DeKalb County, in unincorporated DeKalb, annexing properties into the city. When the NPU receives this application, I ultimately always get the question, the applicant didn't come to the NPU. Well, there is no applicant. The City of Atlanta is the applicant. someone has contacted the city and says, hey, I would like to be a part of the city of Atlanta. In doing so, there are processes that are in place for them to make it known to DeKalb County if they're annexing in from DeKalb County. And the DeKalb County has the opportunity to either approve or reject the annexation. There is a financial impact, there's a school impact, and ultimately the property, if it is annexed into the city, must have a zoning on the property. We as the staff analyze the application and look up the zoning in the city in DeKalb County. A lot that is in DeKalb County that is zoned R75 has a minimum requirement of being 10,000 square feet in area. Our most approximate zoning district to that one is our R4 district. And when you receive the legislation from my office, you will see a recommendation to zone the property to R4 because it is the most compatible. But there is no applicant that is going to show up because there is no applicant. And then it is going to be posted. Someone in my office is going to post it and advertise it. And then should the property be annexed into the city, at the time that it is actually annexed, it has a zoning on the property that is consistent with the city of Atlanta. In addition to that, the last thing I'll talk about with regard to zoning procedures law is special use permits. In the zoning code, you will see it iterated as special permits. In the single family districts, it is section 5 of each of those districts, and it will say special permits. And it will list all of the applications, all of the uses that are permitted by special use permit. Usually there's churches and schools and billiard parlors and those community centers and community gardens, those kinds of things are done by special use permit. And then that actually also goes through the legislative process. An application is submitted, it goes to the NPU, and we're evaluating an application based upon the hours and manner of operation. So if someone comes in and says they want to do a personal care home, we're evaluating that application based upon how they're going to care for the persons who are going to be in the home, how the people that are going to be in the home are going to be accommodated, how are they going to be provided medicine, how they're going to get emergency care, how they're going to get all their other needs met. Are they going to be able to have people come and visit? Like all those things about the manner of operation of an application for a special use permit is how we're going to evaluate a special use permit application. A special use permit is granted, is a use that is compatible in the zoning district, but it's not granted by the permitted principal uses of that district. And we'll get into that when we look into the zoning district itself. This is when I talked about the hearing and all those kinds of things about the location and the place of the hearing. We always meet in city council chambers at 6 p.m. You will always see that on the agenda. If there is an instance where city council chambers is being used on a night, then we'll be moved to another location, but we always post that in the hearing space. The sign must be posted in conspicuous place, which is why you always see our little green signs out at the roadway so people can see them. About, I guess, the first year of the pandemic or the first year of the lockdown of the pandemic, when we started having applications, I believe it was an intern that suggested we put the QR code that linked to our agendas on our sign. So now you'll see a small little QR code patch on each one of the zoning boards that talks about where the hearing will take place. So I'll stop there and take a few questions. Ms. Brooks?
Yes, thank you so very much, Ms. Holmes. This is really informative. I'm curious about like when there's an existing building and it's changing its use, does it need to be rezoned for a different use, or is it just a matter of land use or Office of Building says, sure, you can do that? I guess as a specific example, 250 Williams Street is across the street from me, and it used to be an office building and now it's converting to data center. So I tried to sort through permitting, but I just don't know, do they need to be rezoned or do they just apply for modifications anyway?
So they don't need to be rezoned. The SPI 1 zoning district does permit data centers, but it only permits them through a special use permit, which is why they're going through the special use permit process right now. The other thing is if a building is being used as, say, a restaurant in a C1 district, and they want to and someone has bought the building and they want to change it to a spa. If it is listed as a permitted principal use, or we have interpreted the spa as a permitted principal use in that district, then absolutely they can change the building from an eating and drinking establishment to a spa. The only time that a rezoning would be necessary is one, if they need to increase the floor area of the building. So they would need to rezone it to a district that has a compatible floor area that they're looking for. Or if that use is not permitted, as of not a permitted principal use at all in that district, they will need to rezone to a district where it is allowed as a permitted principal use. Ms. Harden.
All right, well, thank you. I ultimately want to make sure that all of this information is readily available to us, because my concern is that was a whole lot of information and there's more on the variances on zoning. So I really need to understand if are we going to have that information available.
So this and all of my previous zoning fundamentals classes are live streamed and they are on YouTube. They're available for anyone to see. In addition to that, any information that I talk about tonight, you have further questions about, you can always call the planner's desk and one of the planners can help you on a specific topic. And when I'm not busy doing many of the things that I have to do, you can always contact me and I will be happy to assist you.
Now, just curious on the annexing piece, even though there's not a particular person or entity that we may need to talk with, do we still have the opportunity to support or offer non-support?
You always have the opportunity to recommend approval or denial, but in the case of an annexation, the only thing that is before you is the district that is being considered for the zoning category compatible with the zoning category from the district or the county that they are moving from.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Hubbard.
Hey, good. Kid, I think Mr. Kaufman, his hand's been up.
I did see Mr. Kaufman and Mr. Jacinko, but I had called on them before, so I wanted to be fair. Yeah.
As you were.
Ms. Hubbard.
Okay, good evening. I had a question, and it was a reference to, what do you call those? Are they train cars or tractor cars or whatever? They're like those big store vans.
Shipping containers.
Yeah, okay, shipping containers. I did not know that it was legal to put them on your property. I talked with a member of your staff last week. I believe his name was who referred me over to another member. And I talked with him briefly, but I had to go in on another call and I can't ever get him back. But I wanted to see
who did you talk to? I'm sorry, Ms. Hubbard, you kind of went out. Who did you talk to on the staff?
I talked to Nicole.
Okay.
And I talked with Mr. Roger briefly, but I was unable to get Mr. Roger back. I didn't know that it was legal to put those on your property. That I can go and get a couple of them and put them on my property if I so desire.
Yeah, you can put a shipping container on your property. The only prohibition would be in a district where building materials are, there's a building material requirement. The other issue is zoning allows you to put it there, but buildings regulates it. So buildings may require you to put it on a foundation. Buildings may require you to run power to it or electric to it. So I am only one side of the coin. There's another side of the coin that you also must adhere to.
So who you contact to get information from buildings?
So
is there someone there specific that addresses that?
You can,
Well,
you can contact the residential work stream of the Office of Buildings. I don't have the phone number in front of me. I'll try to get the phone number before we end tonight.
Okay,
Okay?
and they would have the answers.
Yes, yes, ma'am. They will have the building code requirements. Zoning says you can put it there. Building
Okay.
code requirements says how you can put it there.
So they can stay there forever?
Yes, but but in accordance with the building code requirements.
So building has a set of codes that the person must adhere.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so you'll try
So
to,
let me ask you this. What are you using the shipping container for? Is it an
I
accessory
don't know what
structure?
I don't know what they're using them for inside on this piece of property. I don't know. What are they using them for? They're not on my property. It's in the area of where I live.
So the
the
shipping
spot.
container just showed up there one day?
Yes, yes.
That may be a code enforcement issue as
He
opposed
said it's
to,
not. He said it's zoning,
who said?
code enforcement.
Okay, yeah, you need to, can you send that question to Samantha so I can look into that? Because I don't,
Send it to who?
Samantha.
Samantha, and I have her.
I'll put
Sam-
my email information in the chat.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Kaufman.
Thanks. Just try to keep it brief. A person sort of asked something similar earlier. I was just wondering, particularly with the rezoning sort of process, I think the legislative process you called that. I was wondering if there is a document, maybe online or somewhere, that sort of has a checklist for those different steps or lays that out.
Yes, on the actual zoning review board page, if you go to our department website and then to public boards and meetings, and then to zoning review board, on that page, you will see the steps for the zoning review board, and on the BZA page, you'll see the steps for the BZA. You'll see in a few moments, you'll see the exact slide I'm talking about when I talk about both of them. That's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Miss Jacinko?
Yes, thank you. You talked about due process and the step after the ZRB meeting being the council approval. I've heard of instances where the ZRB will put forth a recommendation that the council ends up not agreeing with. And I was just curious, maybe this is not even possible to summarize, but if there are examples in when there's a disagreement, is my understanding and from listening to you and your expertise that you're following, the CDP and all these other documents. And I wonder what are some of the scenarios where the city council might or has maybe more commonly disagreed with those where that would be an issue.
So the city council is the legislative authority in the city, and they can make a decision based upon what they understand to be in the best interest of the city. I can't think of a particular instance, but let's say someone has come in and submitted an application to rezone a piece of property, and the neighborhood supports it, right? Neighborhood supports it. They've gone through, gotten whatever, they're excited about it. They can't wait for the project to come. Then it gets to the NPU, and then the NPU recommends denial, right? So the neighborhood said yes, the NPU said no. Then it gets to the public hearing, and the zoning review board hears all the testimony. They have a staff report in front of them, and they've said, well, I agree with the NPU, right? The NPU gave us all this information. This is all the testimony we've received, and they've said these are the reasons why it should be denied. And we also concur it should be denied. Then it gets to city council, and city council has whatever information is before them, including all the stuff that has come through the public hearing process, all the testimony they've received, all the information they've gotten from other citizens. And then the city council, that says, well, I think this is appropriate. It meets these policy recommendations that we have overall in the city. Say it's affordable housing, and affordable housing needs to be here because it's next to a market, or whatever, whatever kinds of things they ruminate in their minds with, and they recommend approval or not recommend approval, they approve it. So everybody before the zoning committee and before the city council is recommending. So NPU is a recommendation, staff is a recommendation, ZRB is a recommendation, city council is approval or denial.
Great, thanks so much. That's helpful.
Ms. Walker. You're still muted, Ms. Walker.
I'm sorry. I wanted to know if a person purchased a church and now they're going to make it a restaurant, would that be a land use question? Would that come before the NPU?
It depends. It depends. If it's a church or a place of worship that is on a parcel that is zoned R4, then yes, that will have to go through a rezoning process. If it is a place of worship on property that is zoned C1 or C2, and an eating and drinking establishment is a permitted use in C1 or C2, that will not come before the NPU, because that is already a granted right in that zoning district.
Okay, thank you.
Mother Moore?
Yes, ma'am. Should I be seeing some permit signs in any development, whether it's a house or a big, that says that they have a right to be doing what they're doing?
There is a requirement in building code that says a building permit must be posted, and there is a form that contractors have to fill out, and it is in the permit box. So if you don't see the permit box on a development site, you will need to contact Code Busters and let them know that the permit has not been posted.
Thank you.
We'll take Ms. Hawkins is the last question we'll take. Go ahead, Mr. Scott.
Hey, thank you. So I had a question on back houses. So in city of Atlanta, I
what
hear
kind of
there's
house?
back houses, like a home built in the back, like to a detached garage, for example. I hear that those are illegal, but I also see some homes that have them. So I was just wondering if that, like, can there be, I guess, non-conforming type structures for back houses?
Okay. Okay, so in the city, they're called ADUs, or accessory dwelling units. Accessory dwelling units are permitted in zoning districts R4. Well, they started in R5 in 2017. And so they were permitted first in 2017 in properties that were zoned R5. Then when we did quick fixes phase 2 in 2018-19, we expanded it to properties that are zoned R4 and R4A. So those are the only zoning districts that permit them to be constructed. However, in older neighborhoods, Inman Park or Ansley, there were existing non-conforming accessory dwelling units. So you can have a non-conforming structure, and that non-conforming structure can continue into perpetuity in accordance with Chapter 24 of our zoning ordinance. Okay, Mr. Clark, I'm sorry, you got one more question, Mr. Scott?
Yes, I did have one other one. So I wanted to go through this land variance as well. So I'm in a R3, and I want to have, a situation where, because I have a detached garage, but I have also a lot of foliage in the back that needs to be cleared out. And I believe I'll need a permit from the city Department of Forestry, or what would be that ordinance for clearing out live foliage?
So that's under tree protection. That's tree protection ordinance that is managed by our arborist division in the Office of Buildings. Your
Got it.
property is zoned R3, so you cannot build an accessory dwelling unit. You can
Correct.
build an accessory structure. And I'm saying this very slowly so everyone hears the difference. An accessory dwelling unit cannot exceed 750 square feet in area. Everything under the roof is measured in the area. An accessory structure cannot exceed 30% of the primary structure square footage. It cannot have a stove. So you can put a hot plate, you can put an air fryer, you can do whatever you want to in it as long as you don't put a stove in it. And that is considered an accessory structure. In addition to that, you can have a guest house on property that are zoned R3, but you cannot have a stove. Again, hot plate, air fryer, what's that thing, that stove thing with the hot thing on it, any of those things, but you cannot have a stove. And if you
Foreman,
want-
George Foreman's.
George Foreman, yeah. And if you want to take down your trees in the back or any of the foliage that you have in there, you can contact our arborist division in the Office of Buildings, and they can have I think they still have arborists coming out. An arborist can come out to your property and help you determine what you need to do on your property with regard to permitting, what can come down, what cannot come down. Okay, last two questions, Mr. Clark.
Yeah, so sort of, you mentioned the right of way earlier and how zoning doesn't really, that's a separate division. But I'm wondering if any sort of zoning district could, ban like a metro line running under the properties, or just sort of any instances where zoning laws might prohibit rapid transit development, something like that.
So rapid transit authorities are like state entities and they can go wherever they want to go. City, county, state are exempt from zoning laws and therefore can do pretty much whatever they want to. So I personally like Townsend Center in DC, in the DC area, and wish that we had one here in Atlanta, but I can see where that may not be the best thing. Some people may not really feel like that much urbanism in one place.
Okay, so if you're going to quash something like that, it would not be through zone.
It would not be through zoning. It's going to be a Herculean effort over at the Gold Dome.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Hawkins.
Ms. Holmes, thank you. It is such a treat to be in your presence and your expertise. I'm down in the Lakewood NPUY corridor. A couple questions. First question is, when is a special use permit required for a property? And if in fact we've had entities that apply for a special use permit, it's not, but they move ahead and do it anyway. It's really a kind of a resource home for unwed mothers. It actually looked like they're doing a good job, but they're in defiance of our not wanting it. So how do you handle that?
So if someone has gone through a special use permit process and it has been denied and they opened it up anyway, they should be reported to Codebusters so that we can cite them and get them corrected. Entities like personal care homes, assisted living, congregate homes, nursing care, all those things are listed as being required by special use permit in certain zoning districts. And what is supposed to appropriately happen is that an applicant submits a special use permit application. That application goes through the legislative process and then is ultimately approved by City Council.
So basically we need to tell on them. That's what
Yes,
I'm.
ma'am. You need
Yeah.
to tell on them. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, Ms. Holmes. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, so now we're going to talk about citizen participation for a little bit. It is very important that you all understand your role in any of these processes that happen in the Office of Zoning and Development. In our office, you have the opportunity to make a recommendation and give input together on applications for rezonings, special use permits, special exceptions, and variances. All the other applications that are in our office, while we do receive review and comments from the community, they are all approved administratively in accordance with our zoning code. But it's ultimately what I want to impart on here is that your role in the process is a role in the process and is not to be used as a baton to beat down the applicant. You should take the application on its face. You should read the application and you should engage with the applicant and the applicant's representative to ultimately assist them in bringing their project to your community in a way that will benefit not only you, but them. So you should always be free and open to talk to them, have open lines of communication, and make sure that you are not using, I cannot express this enough, using the opportunity in this process to beat anyone down. You must have full disclosure, meaning there should not be any time where, even if there's a smaller group of people developed out of an exec board or a neighborhood association or some entity that you have within your NPU system, that party should always be have open meetings, and then that party should also be reporting back to the bigger board. Please be careful about acting on information received at the last minute. And I say that with all honesty, because we want you all to participate in the process. We don't want you to feel as though you're being rushed, but there will be some times when I have to make the decision and say, okay, you've had this 6 months, let's make a decision because this application should not be going on this long. And then I honestly want you to say, hey, we're still working on this point or that point, or we need more time. I don't want it to be ever a time where you are just holding an application because you just don't like it. Fine. If you don't like it, make a recognition of denial and say, these are the reasons that we're making recommendations for denial, and then come to the zoning review board and have your voice heard again. And if you can't be present at the zoning review board meeting or the board of zoning adjustment meeting, please make sure that you put your comments in writing and send them to the secretaries of either one of those boards. You are part of a legal system of regulating private property. You do not own the private property. The private property owner has decided that they think this is the best thing to be financially and economically feasible for them, but they are coming to you and asking you for something, but you don't own the property and you cannot regulate the property as if you own it. The decisions that you make are affecting people's lives, their rights, and their property values. Not only is it affecting their lives, their rights, and their property values, is doing the same to you as well. Each decision that you make and the opportunity that you have to speak on a project, you must take it seriously. And you have very clear authority to opine on anything that comes to your neighborhood or your NPU. But there are rules. And the first rule is decorum and class, and not to be rude to anybody because because you don't like a project or because the person has been snotty or whatever. That's just really not necessary or productive for anybody that's a part of any of the processes that we have. Applicants as well as citizens are entitled to certain safeguards and how business is conducted. So if you say our NPU meets on X date and you must meet with our neighborhood association prior to that, please be open and honest with the persons and say what time, what date. Don't give them a different date or time. They don't show up and then you hold up the application. I'm telling you, it's happened. So please don't do those things. This is what I was talking about before about the number of districts that we have. We have 200 plus zoning districts. We have them being Euclidean districts, which are singular districts, only allowing singular types of uses, churches, schools, single-family houses. We have hybrid zonings, which allow multifamily, mixed use, non-residential, residential uses together. We have SPI districts, which are regionally kind of districts that have regional significance to the city of Atlanta. We have historic districts, we have neighborhood commercial districts. We got a lot of zoning in the city of Atlanta, which is why we're trying to rewrite our code so that it makes sense to everybody. And then the staff, the administrative staff, we don't have to remember, regulations for this place, that place, and the other place. So entitlement, which is what zoning is, the formal name of zoning is entitlement. So it regulates the activities or uses that can take place on a property. So where do we find that? We find that in permitted principal uses and structures. And I'm going to stop share here and bring up my zoning ordinance. Okay, so does everybody see my screen now, my zoning ordinance? So I happen to have been having a conversation with someone in the SPI 9 district this afternoon about a fence that they were trying to put up in SPI 9. Usually SPI districts or special public interest districts have very limited fence allowances because the whole idea is to not fence off the building from the pedestrian, but the pedestrian has the ability to move freely between the street or the sidewalk and supplemental zone to the building, and it's good urban design. But for this example, let me go to property that is zoning district R4. Okay, so the first thing is, when you go to a zoning district, you'll find something called permitted principal uses and structures. Everything that you see here, items 1 through 6, are all the items that are permitted, all the uses and structures that are permitted by right. You'll hear my staff or people who are in this kind of profession say, oh, it's permitted by right, which means by right, they can do these things. They don't have to ask us for anything. They don't have to ask for a rezoning. They don't have to do any of those things. It is permitted by right. They can automatically do it. All they need to do is come in and submit for a building permit. If you say, there was a lot of questions about special use permits. So in section 5, which is, and we're pretty consistent about where you can find things all the time. In section 5, you'll see the list of special use permits. So if you have a property that is zoned R4 and say you want to operate a college, you got money, you want to operate a college, you're going to come up with NPU University, and the property needs to have a special use permit on it. So an application will be submitted for a college or a university. That application comes into my office, we receive it, we send it to the NPU, NPU meets on it, public hearing is held, city council approves it. These are all the things that require a special use permit in the R4 zoning district. In addition to that, what is called a special administrative permit are these things here. These are all the things that are permitted by a special administrative permit. Probably the most common thing that you would find in an R4 district by an SAP is an urban garden as a principal use, which means on that lot, it's a vacant lot. I can think of one, a piece of property in a neighborhood, it's been vacant for a while. Someone owns it and says, hey, I will give you this opportunity. You can do an urban garden. Everybody in this community can farm and garden here. You have to submit a special administrative permit application to my office, and then you can operate an urban garden there under a special administrative permit. And once that's granted, it's granted forever. It never expires. Special exceptions, meaning it's got to go to the BZA. That would be a church or a synagogue or a temple where it's on an area that's 1 acre or less. So if someone comes in our office and say they want to do a certain thing, we're going to the code to find out what they can and cannot do. Either is by right or it is via either a special use permit or a special administrative permit. I also want to pause here about Mr. Scott's question about his existing garage on his property that is zoned R3. There's also a section that is allowed accessory uses and structures, and it lists all the things that you can do as an accessory structure. Here you'll see number 12, where we added in 2019 accessory dwelling units, where the total number of dwelling units on any parcel including the ADU, does not exceed 2, which means you can only have 2, the primary structure and the accessory dwelling unit. But you can have a swimming pool, you can have a guest house, you can have a barn for the horses, you can have solar panels. All those things are permitted as an accessory use, and you would have to get a permit just to build the structure or to add the solar panels. That's been popular. We've seen a lot of those applications here lately. Let me go down to a special public interest district. I'll use SPI 3, which we just adopted about maybe 2 years ago, maybe. At the SPI districts are usually laid out the same way. So there's a statement of intent that there's an area that establishes the boundaries of the SPI. And there's an accompanying map that you'll see when the legislation is created. There's the application procedures. This particular SPI requires that you submit an SAP when you're doing new construction or doing any exterior renovations. And then we get down to the permitted principal uses, and you'll usually see a table, right? So all of these sub areas constitute a new zoning district. Sub area 1 through 9 is a new district. SPI 3 sub area 1 is one district. SPI 3 sub area 2 is another district. And then you'll see this table list all of the things that are permitted. And if it's an X, it's not permitted in that sub area. If you see a P, it's permitted in that sub area. If you see SUP, it's permitted by an SUP in that sub area. And we really like tables and charts because it's really clear for people to understand. Okay. So let's go back to my presentation. Okay, it's a 720, so I'll go up I'll try to go faster. So minimum lot area requirements, you'll hear a lot about the Louis table. Minimum lot requirements regulate the size of buildings, the size and the placement of buildings, and the Louis table regulates its FAR. The Louis table can be found under the RG zoning district, which is chapter 8. And it is a limitation on FAR in the city. Okay. So zoning carries out the comprehensive development plan. Zoning is the regulations. Comprehensive plan is the vision. So properties that are zoned R1 through R4B are single family residential, and they have a consistent land use category of single family residential. And if it's an R5, it's a low density residential category. And you see that we start very, very small at single family residential, and we go all the way up in intensity to MU, which is mixed use, right? So that allows that properties or areas remain stable. That goes back to a question that I believe someone asked about rezoning their property from R4 to R5. So we're always evaluating the stability of our neighborhood. If we allow this property or this area to be rezoned to R5 and this sea of property that is zoned R4, what is that going to do to the neighborhood? Is that going to change it? Is it going to increase the development pressures? Does the neighborhood want density in this particular area of their neighborhood? All those things are being considered when we're making a decision about an application. This is our land use compatibility table. You can see that we have every zoning district across the top, and then every land use designation here on the right-hand side. In order to read this table, say you want to rezone to a zoning district of MR2, which is where you see my cursor here, your land use has to be low density residential. If your land use is not low density residential, then you're also going to have to submit an application to change the land use category as well. These are the procedures I've been talking about. And now you see the graphic of how an application goes to the zoning review board. I'm showing you here what types of applications are heard before zoning review board: special use permit, rezoning, text amendment. So the application is filed in OZD. And so at a simultaneous action, it goes to the MPU, and then OZD staff makes a site visit. They contact the applicant, they give them a planner introduction, they let them know, ask questions about the project, et cetera, et cetera. And what staff will do, will make a recommendation via a staff report, and a recommendation will come out of the MPU after the MPU has met with the applicant. Both the recommendation from the NPU and the recommendation from the staff is before the zoning review board on the night that they make a recommendation. Their recommendation is non-binding, right? So it's just a recommendation. And then it goes to zoning committee of city council, and zoning committee of city council, you are not permitted to speak on an application that has gone before the zoning review board because your public hearing was held here at the hearing, and they are just making their recommendation. Then the item goes to city council where there's another hearing, and then city council ultimately makes the decision where they either approve or deny the request. And then the mayor has 8 days to sign the application or to allow it to be passed into law after the 8th day if he or she has not signed it. Now, there is an appeal procedure to an application. Should someone want to appeal the decision of city council, they have 30 days only from the day of that decision to apply to make an appeal to the Folsom County Superior Court. Okay, for the Board of Zoning Adjustment, please remember that the Board of Zoning Adjustment only hears applications of relief from a requirement. So they hear special exception applications, which are really related to parking and fence heights and those kinds of things, or variances, a reduction in the setback, an increase in the lot coverage, an increase in height. Those kinds of things are heard by the Board of Zoning Adjustment. And the Board of Zoning Adjustment makes a binding decision. Their decision is it. That's it. So you file the application with OZD. The kind of simultaneous action happens at the same time that happened in the zoning review board. And then the Board of Zoning Adjustment board has a recommendation from the NPU and a recommendation from staff. And then they make a binding decision. They either approve it or deny it. And then once their decision is made, there's also the subsequent 30 days appeal period. In addition to that, there are appeals to decisions that staff makes. So I make a decision, Mr. Pace in Office of Buildings makes a decision, any of my staff members make a decision, then someone can appeal that decision, appeal the decision of an administrative official. It goes through the same process, goes to BZA, except it doesn't go to the NPU, it goes to BZA. BZA hears it, they either approve or deny the appeal. And then there's an opportunity also appeal that decision of the BZA before the Folsom County Superior Court. If it's here, that means we're being sued. That means the city is being sued. That means I'm being called for testimony and I've got to appear in court. So there are other applications that come to our office. These are all administrative, which means the only thing that comes from the neighborhood is comments, but the actual approval of the application is done by the administrative staff of the city. So those are special administrative permits. And I want to stop here and make a distinction between a variation and a variance. So before 2019, it wasn't really clear what was heard by the Board of Zoning Adjustment and what was heard under a variation. And so we made it very clear the Board of Zoning Adjustment hears increases in height, increases in lot coverage, reductions in setbacks. That is what the Board of Zoning Adjustment hears. A variation, however, is an administrative approval. Say, for instance, the requirements of the district says that the supplemental zone must be 5 feet. If there is topo issues or any other issues that would prevent an applicant from putting in a 5-foot supplemental zone, then a variation, which is also relief, a variation can be applied for and can be approved by the administrative staff. In addition to that, subdivisions, which is the subdivision of land into new lots, or a lot consolidation, which is the conjoining of land, or a replat or a zero lot line are all done and reviewed and approved by the administrative staff of the city of Atlanta. We also have brownfield loan money that we receive from the EPA. With that money, we've done several projects over the course of several years. We've won awards for the work that we've done with the brownfield revolving loan program dollars. We've given money to Trees Atlanta. We've given money to FCS in Southeast Atlanta, and we've given money to the Atlanta Beltline to continue their work to produce the Beltline. So let's talk about setbacks really quickly. What's my time? 7:28. Okay, setbacks. So let me stop share here. Oh, we got questions. You all want to do questions, or you want me to go to the code?
I have questions.
Okay, go ahead, Mother Moore.
So, I feel kind of silly and stupid on this, but I just need to go ahead with it. I need help. You know, so I've been participating. This is on a community participation, right? I've been participating in the Atlanta Zoning 210. But I'm totally confused about what this means and the impact on the years of work that we did in English Avenue to develop our West Side Land Use Framework Plan. And for the first time in the history, we got zoning to go with it. So now this whole thing with what the city is changing the ordinance. So help me to understand two things: the impact on the work we've done for our neighborhood in establishing a vision for it, you know, and how, as a resident, that I was glad you said to be nice, you know, how to be supportive and cooperative of what, you know, the folks that are doing the Atlanta 210 is saying we need, because we're behind on it.
So
Does
the
that make
zoning,
sense? Is my
yes,
question?
ma'am. So the zoning ordinance has been in need of an update probably for the last 10 or 15 years. It has very, very old language back to 1982, like that says, for instance, eating and drinking establishment. In our office, we all understand that to be a restaurant. However, it says eating and drinking establishment. So we really need to clean up the code to make it up to date. Two, it doesn't do a very good job of being nimble. It is either this thing or that thing. And so we need to create districts where we can have the ability to create communities and housing that is diverse, right? We do a very good job of creating single family, but we need to create single family, we need to create townhomes, we need to create quads, we need to create triplexes, we need to create varied amounts of housing and allow a lot of housing to be in place, because we have people starting at different points in their lives. Some people want to stay in triplexes, some people want to own a triplex, some people want to stay in a single family house. Like, all those things need to be available in the community. And that's what we're trying to do with our zoning ordinance. We're really trying to clean it up. We're trying to make it clear for Mother Moore to understand, as well as somebody who's very technical to understand all at the same time. With regard to your SPI district, the zone strings that were introduced at the very first workshop, what we will do is interpret your existing SPI language into the zone string, because of the exact same elements: site layout, density, I'm missing something, use type, and form. Same exact thing that you see in your two tables under uses and FA and development controls. All that is going to be changed into a zone string. So I don't want you or anyone else in the community to think that we're getting rid of anything that you have. We're making it clear and distinct for everyone to understand.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Stout.
Yeah, thank you. I did have one question, but your comments just raised another. So zone strings are definite?
They are not a definite, but that's what we discussed.
Okay. So can you clarify on what makes something a variance versus a variation, and how that's decided? Is it certain items, or is it a judgment call?
It is certain items. It is actually written in our code what is heard by what is heard as a variance and what is heard as a variation.
That's in the ordinance now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you so much. With the Board of Zoning adjustment on that flow chart, after an application is made, there was the possibility that it could go to an NPU for a recommendation, or that it could go through the administrative process. Is that just a choice of the applicant, or is there something that determines which track it would go on at that point?
The only thing that does not go to the NPU that is submitted to through the BZA process is an appeal of an administrative official. If it is a variance to reduce or increase something, it goes to the NPU. If it is a special exception, it goes to the NPU. But if I've made a decision, say I've made a decision about, I don't know, the size of the orientation of a lot, and someone disagrees with that, they can appeal my decision, and the appeal application does not go to the NPU. The appeal is heard before the BZA only, because there's no recommendation that comes from the NPU on that.
Thank you.
Lauren.
Yes, I had a question. So my property is zoned, it says zoning R4 on the Fulton County website. And I heard you mentioning if I wanted to convert my garage to like a studio apartment, I could only do that if it didn't have a stove, because right now I have a single family home and the basement has a stove. Like the basement is set up to be kind of an apartment of its own.
Don't tell me that.
Huh?
Don't tell me that.
Well, I just bought it. It was already here when I got here. And so you're saying so I would have to get that changed?
Okay, so one, you should not check your zoning by the Fulton County Tax Assessor's information because it's usually wrong. You should only go to GIS Atlanta, which is our GIS site, which we maintain our zoning layers, and that is where you should find your zoning district designation.
Okay.
If you purchase a property that it has an existing basement apartment and has a stove in it, we're going to presume that they got it permitted, which they probably didn't, but we're going to presume they got it permitted. It will stay in place as long as you do not touch it. If there is an issue where you've got to get something else permitted in your home, we will only come to the area where the permit is effective. So if you are putting a fence up on your outside, we're not going to come in your home and look at your stove in your basement. We're not going to do any of those things. We're only going to look at the affected scope of work. If your property is indeed zone R4 or R4A or R5, you are permitted to construct an accessory dwelling unit that does not exceed 750 square feet.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Wilson? Ms. Wilson, are you talking?
Okay, I did. I just unmuted it. Sorry about that. Thank you. Look, just say, through your personal opinion, how much weight do you think the community have when determining a zoning is approved by city council, whereas the neighbors and the NPU denied it?
Ooh. Sometimes a lot, sometimes it's not.
Okay. All right. It's in between. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. It's really on a case by case basis. Again, it goes back to, lots of decisions. Is it supporting a policy initiative? Is it, lots of things. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Baldwin?
Pretty simple question. A few minutes ago, you were referring to a document, and I want to know what the name of that document is and where do we go look at it? Where can we find that document?
Say that one more time, Mr. Baldwin.
A few minutes ago, you were referring to a document you shared the screen. What was that document? Was that a code of ordinances?
That is the code of ordinances. Yes, you find that. Yes, we use municode.com, MUNIcode.com.
Right.
And you navigate through the map, and we're part 16. That's the entire zoning code.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Turner?
Hey, good evening. I was asking, is the comprehension plan binding by the city of Atlanta when approved?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There was a question earlier about setbacks, so I'll switch back to the code because it's probably easier to talk about the code while you're looking at it. I'll go back to my example of R4. Okay, so when you are looking for the setback requirements and the lot requirements for an R4 property, right? You'll find the minimum yard requirements here in section 8. So the rear yard is 35, the side yard is 7, the rear yard is 15. There's also regulations with regard to accessory structures and placement. There is information with regard to floor area ratio as well as to lot coverage. With lot coverage, you can ask that lot coverage be exceeded, right? You can ask for an increase in lot coverage via a variance. You can ask for a reduction in a side yard via a variance. If you are looking to increase the floor area ratio, the only way to increase floor area ratio is to zone the property to a district that has the floor area ratio that you are desiring. The only other instance where floor area ratio can increase is via a transfer of development rights. However, there are only certain districts that allow TDR, specifically SPI 16, which is in the Midtown portion of our city. They allow transfer of development rights because there are a number of historic buildings we want to protect the historic building, but they have actual development density that they can sell off to other properties, and you can increase your density via a special use permit if it is allowed in your zoning district. Let me show what FAR or development controls look like in an SPI district. It is usually in a table as well because there's so many districts, and it goes to the same thing about what the base FAR is, what the open space requirements is. And let me kind of stop here about open space requirements. So that was one of the questions on the focus workshop number 1. And open space requirements are iterated differently in different zoning districts, but open space is required in every district. If you remember my example a few moments ago from R4, and it listed what your setbacks are, the setbacks create the building envelope. But all those areas around it, the green areas, are the open space for a single family district. For a multifamily or a mixed use district, you'll see open space iterated in these kinds of ways. Usable open space, meaning people can use it like it's really true open space, and people can use it, can set out picnic tables, that kind of thing. And we really have been pushing in our office, creating actual usable open space in our urban areas, considering how hot it gets here in Atlanta. So whether it is on the ground level or it is above ground level, where you created a green roof and people can access the area, access the open space area. I can't remember the young man who asked the question about setbacks, but wanted to make sure I answered his question. Samantha, you remember who that was?
I want to say, because I think he sent me a direct message. Notorious Scott?
Wasn't him.
Samantha, this is Bob. I did ask one about
Morris.
Setbacks regarding the consistency between historic lots and non-historic lots. I think you answered the question, though. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Morris. Ms. Williams.
Yes, I had a question about the parking requirements. And I know with a lot of the newer multifamily buildings, I'm not sure if there's no maximum or if it's now the minimum. Can you touch on that? I know.
Yes, the newer districts or where we've done a proactive rezoning, we've set a maximum parking requirement. That is to reduce parking overall on the site or in the area. And that is to decrease the number of cars that are accessing a site, especially when it is close to rapid transit, either planned or that is coming. We also did a lot of work in Quick Fixes Phase 2 with regard to parking. If you're within a half a mile of public transit, there is absolutely no parking requirements. If you are if your building is over a certain age, there's absolutely no parking requirement unless there's alcohol associated with it. Considering we are living living in a very urban environment. There are lots of pedestrians, and we're trying to reduce the car pedestrian impact, but still understanding that there are people who will never give up their cars, and that people that will be coming to different parts of the city. There's still a need to have parking that exists in those areas. Does that answer your question, Ms. Williams?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Zolik.
Thanks. It's Zelik, but not a problem. Just a quick question about sidewalk requirements in public spaces. I know in some places there are no sidewalks at all in single-family housing areas, and in other places there are some on just one side of the street but not the other, or they go a certain distance and then they disappear and then they pick up again for no immediately apparent reason to someone like me. Are there possibilities of getting that more consistent?
So we did add regulations with regard to sidewalks and created scopes of services where sidewalks would be required. But there is a pretty extensive list associated with waivers. If there are no sidewalks that are existing, you can get a waiver because there are no existing sidewalks. I know that a lot of people like you want sidewalks, so we're trying to come up with ways to create more sidewalks in communities, encouraging developers and homeowners, if instead of waiving the requirement, why don't you put it in another place in the city or another place in that actual council district where there are existing sidewalks that need to be replaced or that need to be continued. So that is an ongoing policy initiative that we are working.
System, or just even a furnace where you have a return duct that goes through a filter prior to going through your system where the air gets conditioned, whether it's getting heated.
I'm not sure what that sound is.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Holmes.
You're welcome.
I used to live in a community where they required sidewalks. If there weren't sidewalks, if you were building a new structure, new home, or if you were doing a renovation above a certain dollar amount that was significant, like
We have the
$50,000.
same thing in place, but then you
Okay.
have waivers that you can also
Wonderful.
apply for. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Ms. Stout.
Yeah, I think you said the variance goes with the property. Is there a way to find out what variances have been approved for a given property? I can think of multiple situations when you might want to know that. How can we find that out?
You can submit an open records request with a property address. And if yeah.
That's the only way. There's not like a database or. And if somebody gets a variance to change their front yard setback from 35 to 30, is that just for the project at hand, or is that for any future project that might need that variance?
It is for any future project on that property. Once the variance is approved, it is approved for that property, and the reduction is set in place.
So if they're getting a variance and the footprint's not changing and it's already in the setback, they didn't get a variance the first time?
It may, depending on what the regulations were at that time, or if any regulations were in place at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hawkins?
Yes, ma'am. When can the community itself request a transportation study? We had a developer come in and he didn't want to put sidewalks in. And it just was a very dangerous curve where folks would have to, again, going down to the bus stop, would have to descend the hilltop and descend it in the roadway. And but for us being able to get our council person involved, we would have not been able to get a transportation study. And that request from the council actually revealed that sidewalks were necessary. So how could we as citizens been able to request a transportation study if we felt that it was relevant in terms of what the developer did not want to do?
I don't, there is nothing zoning related that will require someone to do a transportation study. I know that when an application is received in our office under a rezoning, it's sent to our partners in ATL DOT. I don't know if you want to request your council member, make that a function of ATL DOT, but it's not a function of zoning because it's right of way and we don't deal with the right of way.
Okay, so that's not a zoning issue, you're saying?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Ms. Walker?
Yes. I'm sorry, I can't put my hand on that, the chart where you had zoning at the top and land use on the side. I wanted to know if SPI 3-SA7, is it on that chart?
It is not.
Okay.
The land use categories are associated with the West Side Land Use Framework Plan. We adopted the land use first, if I remember correctly, and then we adopted the zoning regulations associated with it, consistent with those categories that were already approved.
Okay, all right, because the property that I mentioned to you before, that was a church, and now someone has bought and they want to put a restaurant in there. It's zone SPI 3-SA7 according to the GIS. I did look that up.
Okay.
So are they able to do that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Because when we created the regulations for the zoning for SPI 3, we already knew what the land use categories were, and we made the permitted uses consistent with those land use categories.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we've got 10 minutes left, and I wanted to talk about conditions. Many times I don't see conditions from communities, and I wonder why there are no conditions, especially issues related to affordability, issues related to special use permits, those kinds of things. So I wanted to not encourage you, because we don't want to have conditions on every piece of property, but make you aware that you can condition a property. That means make a recommendation or approval conditional on a particular project when it comes to your neighborhood. Or NPU. Conditions are meant to mitigate any unforeseen circumstances. So with regards to a community center that operates in your neighborhood, usually a standard practice from my staff is that all of the events must cease by 11 p.m. That's consistent with when our parks are closing in the city of Atlanta. So everything must cease by 11. But if we don't get conditions from the neighborhood, and then we later get complaints about, oh, they're operating at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. Oh, it's this, it's this, that. The opportunity to condition the property has been missed. So I want to make sure that you all are aware that you can add conditions. Ms. Gwen, Miss or Mr. Gwen.
Sorry, hi, yes. So can you add the condition to, like, let's say a luxury development comes to a neighborhood that has high poverty? Can you request a condition to can you request community benefits from a luxury developer? Can you also
community
request
benefits agreements are not a part of zoning decisions. They are private agreements between the neighborhood and the developer.
So you can't add a condition, like if the neighborhood association, no, you can't add a condition that way.
You can create a community benefits agreement between the neighborhood and the developer that lists whatever those things you want to. If there is a condition, it must be specific to the application. So the condition would be if it's in an area that doesn't have inclusionary zoning, and you all are concerned about affordability, 50% of the units must be affordable based upon 80% of the AMI. That's a condition that we could enforce.
Yeah.
Or
okay.
that the height of the building cannot exceed 150 feet, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the kinds of conditions that you can do. In a community benefits agreement that the city is not a part of, you can, if you all can negotiate with the developer. I know I've seen donations from the developer to the neighborhood association in an amount of $100,000 to do XY thing in the neighborhood association.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Mhm,
Ms.
thanks.
Jacinko?
Yeah, thanks. Where do the conditions get entered in, or what part of the process? So the developer has its application, and you've been in a conversation with them about particular things. Do you ask them to put the conditions in the application, or you bring that up at the MPU meeting and association meeting or ZRB meeting?
You make them a part of your recommendation out of the NPU, and your planner is supposed to communicate the recommendation along with the conditions to my office. But I always encourage the NPUs to write up their own conditions and recommendation and send that directly to the board secretary of either the BZA or the ZRB. You usually see more conditions at ZRB and less conditions at BZA.
Great, thanks.
Mother Moore?
Yes, thank you. So tell me if this is an example. So we had a request for a alcohol permit, and the parking was defined by the lots that were on the site. In addition to a lot that was like 2 blocks away. So could we have put a condition that would have said that we needed to see the agreement for that within 90 days or before the city approved? What would that?
It sounds like it was a shared parking agreement. So we being the administrative staff would approve the shared parking agreement in accordance with the SAP regulations. You could have said that you would need to get a copy of it upon their submittal to our office as a condition, and it would have been binding on a zoning action. Now, I'm not sure if the alcohol police people allow you to add conditions. I can't talk about their conditions. I can only talk about mine.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I think I've talked about Mr. Mosley.
Hi, I just wanted to know if I wanted to know more about conditions, where would be a good place to go and like look into it further?
Well, conditions are specific to a project itself. So there really isn't a resource that I can send you to. I was asked at some event to put together some like customary conditions that we see all the time. I haven't had the opportunity to do that with all of my staff changes here lately. So that is a document that I've promised the NPU team, and that hopefully I'll get out at least by this early summer. So look for that document coming out. Okay, so let me just go over a couple of resources right quick. So we started the online permitting process in 2020. That is the only way to submit an application to the Office of Zoning and Development or the Office of Buildings. A seller will require you to create an account, and then you can, once your account is created, you can upload your documents, and then you can follow your project along via the Acela portal system. Please remember that there are 2 different buckets. There's planning portal, and all the applications that I talked about tonight go into the planning portal, and all the permitting applications go into the building permit portal. So just make sure you're making that distinction when you're applying for something. The zoning ordinance online can be found at MuniCode, and I believe I saw Samantha put this link into the chat. We also have a permit navigator, which gives you an idea of what your fees may be, what kind of project is applicable in certain areas. And it also gives you the opportunity to send in a question. When you send that question in, it comes to my email address, and then I answer the question back for you. There's also GIS Atlanta, either property info or planning viewer. Property info gives you a quick kind of assessment of properties in Atlanta. Planning viewer gives you more information because you can turn layers on and off. You can turn on the zoning layer, you can turn on the comp plan layer, you can turn on the Atlanta City design layer, you can turn on topo layers. So there's lots of layers in the planning viewer, and I highly suggest that you use the GIS. Hint, hint. If you intend on taking Zoning Fundamentals 2 and the lab, you need to go to GIS online prior to our next meeting, as well as to the zoning ordinance online, because you will have homework to do for Zoning Fundamentals 2 and 2 and 3. And then all of the forms that I talked about tonight are on our website. Information to reach my office is on the website. Information to reach me is on the website. If you have a question that you need answered, the planner's desk is open Monday through Thursday from 8:15 to 2. On Thursdays, calls are on, inquiries are only received by email, and Monday through Wednesday, they're received by phone and by email. My main number, and you would get my customer assurance specialist, Ms. Rhonda Goodman, who will be happy to assist you. My main number is 404-330-6145. If you're not going to join me for Zoning Fundamentals 2 and 3, I hope that you learned something tonight. If you have other questions, please reach out to my office and someone will be happy to assist you. And I see a question from Nichelle Bell.
Thank you. Are there any current moratoriums in Atlanta right now?
There's a moratorium for the Upper West Side CID. There's a moratorium on subdivisions in District 8.
Okay.
And I believe those are the only 2 that are active right now.
Okay, and where do we find that information?
In
for future
GIS.
reference? GIS, okay, thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions? Ms. Williams?
Hi, the question I had was, could you repeat about if we were going to take the next segment of this class, the GIS, what did you say we needed
You
to do?
should navigate to the GIS website, and you should become familiar with how to find information on that website. Because you will be utilizing it for Zoning Fundamentals 2 as well as 3.
Thank you.
Ms. Hawkins?
Yes, ma'am. She just asked about moratorium. That's kind of a broad category. Moratorium on what, building? What is it exactly she's asking?
It prohibits the issuance of a building permit, a land disturbance permit, or a special administrative permit that has not already been applied for on property that is in a moratorium area. It means it's an all stop. And usually we are doing an all stop in order for us to create legislation that will apply to those properties.
And you just enumerated the instances in which a moratorium is issued. Is that what you just did? Those?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good, thanks.
Mother Moore?
Yes, ma'am. Could you be so kind? If we get a notice with the next session, you'll include the homework piece?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Williams, have another question?
Oh, no. I think I just forgot to lower my
Okay.
hand. Sorry.
All right. Thank you all for your time this evening. If you're not going to join us for Fundamentals 2 and 3, I hope that you did get something out of tonight. If you have other questions, please reach out to my office. We are a little bit slower in answering questions because of the staff shortages, but we will get around to you. If you have a project that you are going to do, or you're seeking to do, or need answers on, we're always happy to answer a question for you all. Okay. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before everybody
informative
leaves,
meeting.
before we close out really quickly, I just want to let you know about our upcoming classes for NPU University. First, thank you so much. People are not muted. Okay. Thank you so much, Kieta, for all you do. But really briefly, we have upcoming NPU University courses. Next week, we will have Jobs and Career Opportunities in Your Community, which is a course that we partner with WorkSource Atlanta. That will be next Thursday at 6 p.m. And the following, well, 2 weeks after that, we'll have a course February 23rd at 6 p.m. Introduction to Invest Atlanta, which is pretty much our economic hand with the city of Atlanta. On March 1st at 6 p.m. And this will actually be an in-person class. The location will be placed online shortly. It will be our first parliamentary procedures course for this year. And then another course in March will be avoiding housing scams and reducing property taxes right before that homestead exemption is due. This is March 9th at 6 p.m. And if you want to register for any of these courses, you can visit npuatlanta.org. All of these courses are actually online right now for you to register with spots available. Also, you can follow us at NPU Atlanta on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, as well as on Nextdoor City of Atlanta Neighborhood Planning Units. You all will have received in the chat a link with the evaluation. We ask that you please complete the evaluation. We want to make sure that the courses get better with time, of course, with practice. You'll also receive an email tonight with an attachment of the actual presentation and also links to npuatlanta.org, as well as the video link where we store all of our videos for NPU University. If there are any questions, you all have a good night, and thank you again for hanging out with us today.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Very informative. Thank you.
Extraordinarily informative.
Can't wait for the next
session. Put that in evaluation.
Absolutely.